critique things as she flows. I think to give her the best possible platform can, while at the same time understanding that, black male privilege, again, on the setting myself aside and elevating her platform as a black woman will be crucial to longevity and strength in her development. I think that, again, on that same note, men, we create a sexist environment that women can't really recreate. So women can't necessarily be sexist in the same way that men have established a system, because the same system that is structurally racist is built on. It's just very clear. The norm in this country is masculine. So I think that having those understandings when I'm raising her will be very important. Jump down here real quick.
Now I got 3 points.
Oh.
Another time. So, I'll come out of this discussion from, as I recount in my mind, were a description of the events that took place on that particular evening. I'm wondering if you could offer some insight into what sort of advice you might have received that would have allowed you to mitigate the situation and not be victimized in the way that you did. Now, I tend to think I don't quite see it.
And that's
Except the only thing I could see is you have the audacity to open it up.
He's a black man, and it is a crime to be a black man in public in a white supremacy. The United States started off as an unapologetic white supremacy. We had institutions of slavery. The Naturalization Act of 1890 or 1790 said that only white males, free white males, could be citizens of this country. So you established a white supremacy. And that foundation has persisted to this very day. So that even now, even today, when people of color go out in public, they commit an offense against white racist sensibilities. And the best example of this is Donald freaking Trump, who has political rallies and on Super Tuesday kicks people of color out of these rallies to the cheers of the throngs who love him, because he is playing the white supremacist sensibilities that have been an undercurrent in the United States from the beginning, that are alive and well today. And in fact, it would be nice to think that we were mitigating these. They seem to be getting worse at this juncture. Is your work getting easier because of the presence of Donald Trump and all of his fanatical followers? Or, like the Black Lives Matter movement, I mean, they're doing very good work, but my God, they're attracting so much hostility. It's got to make the work of activists a hell of a lot tougher.
Well,
I did. Too bad.
I can answer both of those. Yes.
I want to hear it. I don't care if you're listening.
I can answer both of those. In my personal experience, no, and that's just that I don't think there are going to always be ways to prevent these types of agendas from transpiring. An individual comes at you with hostility. The only thing I could have done in that situation is exactly what you said. Just been, entirely subservient and just put my head down and let them ransack my vehicle to whatever degree they wanted to. And then if they wanted to carry out some sort of violent agenda on me afterwards, they would have been free to do that as well. And that's, again, part of the not necessarily preventative components, but these are, tools. So preparing yourself or your kids or whoever for instances that could be that could transpire to any degree. Your question, let's see. So remind me again.
We have trouble following.
Is Trump
Oh, right, about, yeah.
Making your life more difficult.
And so it's interesting you say that. So like Black Lives Matter movement, for example. I mean, the movements throughout history have always radical movements, right? And the idea that word itself has always been misconstrued, and it's been kind of confused with this emblem of violence and masculinity, when really it's just like a different type of thinking, right? That leads to the benefit of humanity, humankind. So I think, you know, when we look throughout history, historically, the historical lineage of movements, so like the Black Panthers, for example, were met with similar scrutiny in regards to, you know, the media flared up all of these obstacles that would deter from the messaging and create controversy in the public eye. And the same thing is sort of happening with Black Lives Matter. They're doing great work, and there's been incredible amounts of controversy that have stirred up simply over a name or over demonstrations that have taken place. And I don't think that the work has necessarily gotten more difficult. I think the same obstacles that existed throughout history are still obstacles today. We never really came out of the civil rights movement. We're still very much at the forefront of the civil rights movement. So the oppressions and obstacles that we saw our ancestors go through, I think, are still very much relevant.
In your opinion, what does it say about our country that we can't trust our law enforcement? And in reality, in our lifetime, will we ever truly have faith in the law enforcement again?
Well, I think, again, you have to look at history. Yes, history has, the historical components that law enforcement stem from were never developed to keep communities of color safe initially. Black, brown, Latino communities were all being policed by individuals who were there pretty much activating on, for example, Jim Crow laws, Mississippi ordinances, all of these other codes and establishments kind of were developed in when allegedly post-slavery, post-segregation, as everything else started to develop, we would come up with constitutional amendments that would criminalize folks for no real reason other than existing. And then we would funnel them into this prison industrial complex that now is creating enormous amounts of revenue. And I think when we look at the system as a whole, some of the say your question one more time.
It's just, what does it say about our country that we don't fully trust our law enforcement? Like, for you, like, what happened to you in your experience? Like, that's fully, like, it hasn't happened to me, but now, like, I've been hearing about, like, more and more through my entire life, and I don't trust law enforcement. And what does that say about our country, and how can we move forward as a whole being country that we can't even trust the people who are supposed to protect us?
So yeah, no, where I wanted to go with that was, if you look at the historical components of our country, and especially recent events that have led to the loss of life, people being brutalized, a lot of the time, and this is a perfect way to highlight intersections, a lot of the time police are responding to cases of mental illness or homelessness, which are through this hyper-vigilant lens, and someone ends up dead, somebody ends up killed. So taking, I think, taking bits and pieces of the system and transforming them. So for example, say we have first responders who are nothing more than community members who have organized together and come to some sort of an agreement that when something's happening in the community, we're going to call X, Y, and Z, and they're going to go over and investigate it first. And if it's something that needs law enforcement, maybe we can carry out law enforcement from there. But having alternatives to using police as first responders in instances that may not require law enforcement. Because in some communities you can call the police and they're just not going to come. So that you have to kind of develop this alternative measure of policing in specific instances. 65% of the people in Denver City Jail right now are there because they can't post a bail of anywhere from $100 to $1,000. Most of those are infractions that are from vagrancy, trespassing, whatever else, right, that are going out to our homeless community who are failing to appear in court because of whatever barrier they're suffering from at the time. The city attorney writes that, or, you know, there's a citation issued to an individual who then later fails to appear in court and then is later picked up for failure to appear in court over some minor citation that perpetuates our criminal justice system. So I think having an understanding that, you know, well, one thing you could do is work to do away with the bail structure, or work to do away with the right to rest. There are different avenues to break apart this oppressive criminal justice system, and it's not just going to be law enforcement. I mean, law enforcement is a component of mass incarceration. So having different intersectional approaches to dismantling mass incarceration, I think, would be the best chance we have at coming up with a system that will work best for all of us. And I honestly don't know if that looks like totally dismantling what we've built, but some of the components that are involved in what we've built are doing exactly what they've been functioning to do. And people think that there's this idea that the system is broken, or that, you know, it's now operating in a different way than it was operating 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago. But it's not. It's been designed to do exactly what it's doing, and that's why it's been growing, and that's why it's been able to be privatized, so on and so forth. We have to do away with the components that are really fueling mass incarceration and the prison justice complex. Yes.
There's quite a few people in here that are associated, and they're hoping to go into law enforcement after they graduate. What advice would you give to them?
Oh, that's a good question. So from the lens of law enforcement, I think that it's similar to a courtroom in the sense that you have total control over a particular situation, whatever situation you choose to engage in. In most cases, you now have total control over the outcome of this individual's life. You know, there are obviously some exceptions. However, same thing when you're in front of the judge. You know, they are responsible for controlling that courtroom. If they say it was controlled temporarily, not permanently. So I think, you know, being very open and empathetic to narratives of people in the community that would be policed if you go into law enforcement. Listening to the things people say about law enforcement who are already policing those communities, and take them to heart. Spend time in those communities, getting to know people. Come up with alternatives, or work with organizations who specialize in doing away with mass incarceration, criminal reform, reentry, law enforcement transformation, etc. Having those partnerships with groups in the community, building relationships with the people in the community that you police. Really one of the best ways you can get off on that right foot, in conjunction with you hear about something happening, or you witness something happening, being able and willing to step across the line, the blue line, the code of silence, whatever you want to call it, and not allowing your fellow comrades, your fellow officers, to continue in these types of behaviors, perpetuating the system. Because if you turn a blind eye to it, you're really just as guilty. You're looking at two pieces of it. But be willing to go against the norm in this cultural setting. And I'm not sitting here saying, you know, this isn't a fuck the police lecture.